Hi everybody, welcome to PCS 101. My name is Lillian Ruiz and I'm the instructor for the class. I'm sorry we aren't meeting in person, but as we know, these are interesting times that we're in. So instead, I have this video greeting for you. This is an online class. And I thought what I would do today is just tell you a little bit about the course and some of the work that we'll be doing over the course of the semester. And basically, this is what I would have been doing if we were meeting in person. And then we can begin the actual curriculum next class. So if you're looking at our Moodle site, you can see that there are several sections at the top of the Moodle site that will be useful to you over the course of the semester. The first is entitled Syllabus and Other Documents, and that's a folder that includes our syllabus, which I'm going to be reviewing now, and our course outline, which is the schedule of our readings, as well as any of the other handouts that I would have distributed over the course of the semester. There also is a section underneath that entitled Due Dates, where I've taken all of the due dates from our course outline and listed them all in one area so that you can see those. And there's also a section that says past class sessions. And what I'm going to be doing is that I will be moving our past classes into that area so that our current class is the class that's visible for that particular session. You can also see that I've got a discussion forum that I'll be talking about soon. This is the way that you will be able to interact with me and your peers in relation to the course, what we would have been doing in class discussion if we were meeting in person. And I've also got an optional live chat. So on Tuesdays from 1 to 1:30, and you're not required to attend, but I will be available in our class chat room if you wanted to say hello, raise any questions, or interact with your peers. Again, it's not a requirement. And then on Thursdays from 1 to 1:30, I will be in our optional Zoom room. Same idea, it's not required, but certainly you are invited to join and you can interact with me and interact with your peers. And then you can see that for today, week 1 is basically just our introduction. So this is where I wanted to review the syllabus with you. And again, you can see the syllabus in that first section with syllabus and other documents. You can see that I've just got some contact information at the top there, including my name, Lillian Ruiz. Most people call me Lillian. I'm pretty informal. Feel free to call me whatever you feel comfortable with. My email address, which is my surname, Ruiz, at gcc.mass.edu. You might notice there is no first initial there. That indicates how long I've been at the college. I was one of the very first to get email. And my phone number is there, and you can certainly leave a message and I will get back to you because I won't be in my office. But obviously you can interact with me either through our chat room, as I had indicated, which is Tuesdays 1 to 1:30, our Zoom, which is Thursdays 1 to 1:30, or you can make an appointment with me for a Zoom, a chat room, or even the old-fashioned telephone. So in terms of the class, sometimes students are a little bit surprised to see that there is a textbook required entitled The Principles of Public Speaking. And this text basically just gives an overview of the elements that are important with public speaking. So we will be doing most of the class readings up front so that we could utilize that information when we're actually delivering speeches. And obviously, as an intersession class, this is a pretty condensed class. So each class session is the equivalent of a week in the academic semester. That's both the good news and the bad news. Bad news in that it's very condensed, but good news in that after 3 weeks, you will have completed an entire semester's worth. And I do teach this class during the academic semester, and there is no difference in terms of the curriculum. So this basically is what I do during the first week of the semester. If we were meeting in person, is I review the class and we have introductions, and then we begin with the curriculum. It also indicates on the syllabus that it's a good idea to have a dictionary and a thesaurus for reference. I put that on all of my syllabi. I'm an English professor, so I mostly teach English classes, but I also teach public speaking classes, and I also teach media and popular culture classes. So I teach a little bit of everything, and it's hard to believe that I've been at GCC for 28 years. The time does disappear. And in terms of the dictionary and the thesaurus, well, that's particularly useful in a writing class, an English class, and even in a media class. Perhaps it's a little less useful for a public speaking class, in that we will be talking about that the positive and the negative of public speaking is that there's a performance element associated with it, so that you can't necessarily get as precise with your language in the way you would if you were constructing a paper. Nor should you try. The idea is that you are connecting with your audience. And obviously, if we were meeting in person, you would have a live audience. That's going to be a little bit tricky with an online class. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but basically, you're going to have the option when it comes time to delivering your speeches as to how you would like to deliver your speech. So you can either pre-record your speech and post it on our Moodle site, and then your classmates can view that speech and respond to it. Or, for those of you who are interested, we can set aside a time on Zoom for you to present your speech live to anybody who would also be on Zoom. So when we get a little bit closer to the due dates, I'll be asking you if you think you would like to present via Zoom live, because I will take a list of those names and try to find a common time between us in which we could do that. And again, you always have the opportunity or the option of posting your speech via video to the Moodle site. And you get that option for all of the speeches that we will be delivering over the course of this semester. But let me return back to the syllabus before I start talking too much about assignments, and just review the course description of the class, just to remind you about the course, that this is about the principles of public speaking as communication, stressing the role of the speaker in the communication process. The course emphasizes the proper preparation and delivery of speeches. And in fact, as important as delivery is, preparation is even more important, as we will discuss. Each student delivers a minimum of 5 speeches and participates in small group activities. And there is a prerequisite for this class, what we call English 101 or Introductory Composition at GCC. So the idea is that you already have some familiarity with putting together an argument, which is what we will be doing in public speaking. So if you think you do not have that prerequisite, please contact me, and then we'll talk about what options make the most sense for you. So if we continue in the syllabus, you'll see there's a section that says student learning outcomes, that as a result of successfully completing this course, this is what you should expect, that you'll be able to, 1, improve oral communication skills. Obviously, we all have oral communication skills, or we never would have gotten to this point in our lives. The idea is to improve upon them. To develop skills and self-confidence in acquiring and presenting information. And sometimes we already know the information that we're going to present, so we don't necessarily have to acquire it. But sometimes we don't, and then we need to do some research, and we'll be talking about both of those situations. And of course, the actual presentation. To apply critical and analytic thinking. And I put this in all of my syllabi and all of my classes. And critical isn't necessarily criticism, talking about something that's bad, but it's asking questions, interpreting, analyzing, or doing what I'm fond of saying, toddlers do very well. They ask questions, especially why. And I've often said that's the difference between high school and college, that high school is about what, and college is about grappling with the whys, which are oftentimes not easily answered. So thinking about critical and analytic thinking in terms of all of the courses that you'll be taking at GCC, and also to promote a greater understanding of communication for this particular class in formal and informal settings. And I think that that's something that most of us do rather naturally, that depending on the situation, that influences what we say, how we say it, and how we present ourselves. So obviously we probably dress differently and conduct ourselves differently at a wedding than we might at, let's say, a job interview or a funeral. So it's about gauging the situation and adapting accordingly. And then also to promote each student's unique sense of voice. In other words, you shouldn't sound like me. You shouldn't sound like the textbook. You should sound like yourself. And I always say at the beginning of a semester that your greatest strength is your personality when delivering a speech. And I'm well aware that students don't necessarily believe that, but trust me, it is. And the idea is that you want to try to make some sort of a connection with your audience. It doesn't have to be perfect. There is no such thing as the perfect speech. And I'm well aware that delivering speeches leads to a good level of anxiety. And in fact, some studies have shown that individuals fear public speaking more than they fear death. I think this warrants repeating, that there are individuals who say they fear public speaking more than they fear death, and death's pretty bad. So the idea with, I think the fear of public speaking comes with a lack of practice, that unless you are an entertainer or a teacher, you probably don't speak to larger groups. So that's really the intent of this particular class, is to give you the opportunity to speak to a larger group. And while individuals focus, and rightly so, on the fact that they have to deliver a speech and present a speech, it's equally important that all of you have to be the audience for speeches that are being delivered. Because we could all practice our public speaking skills by ourselves, but that wouldn't be public speaking. The idea is that we've got an audience that is willing to listen. And it just so happens that this particular audience also has to present. So everyone in the audience is going to have the experience of both being an audience member as well as a presenter. So how to do this in an online format, and this is under the procedures section. That if we were meeting live, we would meet Monday through Friday from 9 to 12. So what I'm going to be doing, since we're not meeting live, is posting a video of myself, much like this one, discussing the class material I would normally discuss in class. And I'll post that every day at the time in which our class would normally meet, and that would be at 9 a.m. And then you'll have a 24-hour deadline to watch that particular video for that class and answer a corresponding attendance question in our class discussion form. And you can see that the class discussion form is in the top section of our Moodle. It would be very similar to a question I might ask you in class. The questions I like to ask don't necessarily have right or wrong answers. What I'm interested more in is seeing your thinking, and I will respond to all of your answers. And if the 24-hour deadline is a little bit too difficult for you to meet, just ask me for an extension. I'll be happy to grant it to you. But do keep in mind that this is a condensed class, so that we would normally be meeting every day, and in 3 weeks our semester will be over. Your attendance, so to speak, will be your response on that discussion form for that particular discussion question. So as long as you answer the question, then you're counted as being in attendance for that particular day. And you're not required to have any additional interaction on the discussion forum. Any additional interaction you have on the discussion forum with your classmates is basically much like class participation, similar to the way that you would do in a live class. And I know some students learn best by participating and being very vocal. Others learn better by listening and contemplating. And I don't think one is necessarily better than another. So you can decide how much or how little you would like to participate, much like you would decide in a live class when to raise your hand or not raise your hand. You should, however, read everyone's responses for optimal learning. So again, this is going to simulate much of what we would have had in our discussion if we were meeting in class. Again, one of the reasons why you want to try to make that 24-hour deadline, so that you can read all of your classmates' responses as well, so you would get an idea of what we would have discussed. As I indicated, I'm also going to be holding optional chat sessions. Those will be on Tuesdays, so that'll begin tomorrow if you're watching this video on Monday from 1 to 1:30. And I'll also have optional Zoom sessions, and that'll be Thursdays from 1 to 1:30, though you can always make an appointment with me if you'd like. Think of it as another opportunity for participation. Again, not a requirement. There will be some written quizzes over the course of the semester. They will be announced in advance, and they will be open book, open note. because we are in an online format. And what I will be doing is basically dividing up the classroom readings that we'll be doing mostly towards the early part of the semester into the material that will be covered by the quizzes, that and whatever it is that I discuss in my class videos, which should be basically a kind of review of what's in the textbook. So the quizzes are 20 questions each. They are mostly short answer, though there are some true, false, and multiple choice. And there will be 4 quizzes over the course of the semester, and I drop the lowest grade. So if you do poorly on a quiz, I can drop that grade. If you miss a quiz, I can drop that grade, because generally speaking, unless you make advanced erasures with me ahead of time, there are no makeup quizzes. Or if you do well on your first 3 quizzes, you can elect not to take the last quiz, which is on the very last day of class. So these quizzes I will be posting on Moodle and ask you to send the responses to my email, because my grading program works best with my email, and that's ruiz@gcc.mass.edu, via PDF, please, because my grading program uses PDF, and then I will return the graded quizzes to you via email. And in terms of the way, again, the class will work, our procedures will include class discussion and group work via our online discussion forums, mini lectures via the videos that I will be posting, and of course, the student speeches that you will be delivering that you can decide to deliver either live via Zoom, and we'll determine a time that is convenient for the bulk of us, for those of you who have an interest in that, or you can pre-record your speech and post it for the class to comment upon and view on our Moodle site. And I'll talk a little bit more about deadlines and so forth in the next few minutes, but let me just get to the general requirements of the class. You're expected to complete all of the reading and writing assignments by the due date, and we will have 3 graded speeches over the course of the semester, which means that any other speeches that we have will be ungraded practice speeches. Failure to deliver a speech at the date and time assigned will result in failure for the assignment unless the student has unforeseeable, emergency, and justifiable reasons based on the evaluation of the instructor. So basically, you've made a commitment with your audience to deliver a speech in a particular time, at a particular time, at a particular place. You want to honor that as much as possible. Obviously, if there's an emergency, you can't do that. But you want to try as much as possible to honor that commitment to your audience. And as I had indicated, there will be periodic quizzes over the course of the semester in which I will drop the lowest grade. Generally, no makeup quizzes given because I am dropping the lowest grade. But if you can give me enough advance notice, we might be able to work out some sort of an agreement. So there's a statement here. If you are a returning student to GCC, you've probably heard this before, the Institutional Services Disability Statement. And basically, Greenfield Community College values inclusion and equal access to its programs and activities, and is committed to fostering an environment of respect and full participation. Our goal is to create learning environments that are equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. So if there's an aspect of the instruction or design of this course that results in barriers to your inclusion or accurate assessment or achievement, please notify the instructor, me, as soon as possible. And if you are a student with a disability and you need reasonable academic accommodations, please contact the Office of Disability Services as soon as possible to discuss the needs and options that are available to you. And you can see that on the syllabus. I've got the website for that as well as their contact phone number. So in terms of the speeches themselves, you can see on the syllabus there's a section about speeches, that in this course we will examine the following principles of speech delivery. Number 1, discovering and limiting the topic. Or what I like to say is, what am I going to talk about? And I'll give you some general guidelines, but then you're going to have to determine the specifics. And then you're also going to have to determine how to fit that into the time frame that you've been given. And I usually see an interesting transformation over the course of the semester, where at the beginning, students are worried about filling the time. And then by the ending of the semester, students are worried about being able to fit in everything into the time period that they've been given. I think that's in part because they become more comfortable in terms of presenting. Adapting to the audience. And we have an advantage here in that we all will know who our audience is. It's the members of this class and myself. And while we may not necessarily know each other individually, we still have a good amount of information about each other. If nothing else, in one way or another, we are all connected to Greenfield Community College. So you can expect a college level audience, and that is a wealth of information in terms of what topics you can discuss. In other words, you're addressing adults and the kind of language that you can use. Again, if you were addressing children, you would probably adapt your language and your topic as well. Gathering information. And as I had indicated, sometimes you already know the contents of what it is you're going to be giving your speech about. But by the ending of the semester, I'm going to ask all of you to do some outside research for one of your speeches, for your last speech. So we'll talk about how to get information. And we live in an interesting time. We've never had more access to information because of the internet. And yet, ironically, we've never had less access to information because of the internet. Yes, as you know, anybody can post anything on the internet. So just because it's available, it doesn't mean that it's accurate. So I wanted us, when we get to that point in the semester, to talk about using the internet and electronic resources a little bit more effectively and efficiently, as well as remembering books and magazines and essays. They still exist in print form. So it doesn't all have to be electronic. Organizing and outlining, that probably is going to be the most important part of the class. It's the piece you don't see when you are watching somebody give a speech, the way that they've gone through preparing. But it's the preparation that ultimately will lead to the presentation. And then developing an acceptable style, suiting purpose and occasion, as I had indicated to you, about adapting to your audience and the situation. Practicing and presenting the speech. And in fact, I believe so much in practice, and that I am going to be setting aside time in class for all of you to practice your speech, or at least have some communication with me about your speech before you actually deliver it. Whether we do that via Zoom, or we do that via email, we do that via phone, or some combination thereof. Coping with communication apprehension. And that is the reality, is that most people feel nervous. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because nervousness means that you have some investment in the situation. You just don't want nervousness to prevent you from being able to produce. So we'll talk about some techniques to perhaps manage anxiety. And active listening, responding to the speeches of others. And again, part of the class isn't just presenting a speech, but listening to the speeches of others and serving as audience for them. But also, this is how you can learn effective techniques for public speaking when you are exposed to the speeches of others. And in fact, I'll be showing you some practice speeches done by students like yourselves, in no way affiliated with GCC, though. These are speeches that have been uploaded onto YouTube, so I consider them public access. But we'll use those as sort of templates of how we could proceed when we actually deliver our own speeches. So as I indicated, you are going to be delivering 3 graded speeches over the course of the semester. The first being an autobiographical speech. That will be a 5-minute speech in which you are going to tell your audience, your classmates in effect, a little bit about your life and your life history. There are lots of different ways that you could proceed with this, as we will discuss. You can give a life overview. Obviously, there's going to have to be a lot of condensing to get it into 5 minutes. You could decide to focus on a particular time period in your life, or a particular event in your life, or a particular person in your life. That's another way of going about it. If you don't like to necessarily self-disclose too much about yourself, you can focus on your education, whether it be your educational history, or it could be on your goals for your educational future, or it could be in your educational present. And why are you taking a public speaking class during intersession, for instance? But the idea behind the autobiographical speech, outside of giving you an opportunity to practice some of the skills that we will be reviewing about delivering speeches, is so that you can get to know your classmates a little bit better. And then we have, after that, an informative speech. That's going to be a 10-minute long speech, so it'll be twice the length. And this is where you are going to be teaching your audience about something. And one of the pieces of advice I'll give you is that you perhaps choose a topic that you already have some knowledge about and some familiarity with, so that you don't have to do a lot of outside research. That said, there's nothing preventing you from talking about something that you would need to learn about. But again, keep in mind the intercession is a very condensed period of time. And lastly, we have the persuasive speech. And the persuasive speech is probably the most difficult to deliver. It is at the ending of the semester. It will be 15 minutes long, so you can see there's an incremental increase in the length of the speeches, where you're going to try to convince us to either take a particular position or to take a particular action, or perhaps a combination of the two. So we will talk more about guidelines for all three of these speeches over the course of the semester. I don't want to inundate you with too much information, and I don't expect you to remember much of this information. I view this as just an overview of the entire semester, just so you have a general sense of what we will be doing in the future, and then I can talk about all of these elements a little bit more in depth as the semester progresses. I do want to approve your specific topic beforehand, even though you've got a general idea that your first speech is autobiographical, your second speech is informative. That happens to be my favorite speech, by the way. You'd be surprised how much you can learn in 10 minutes. And then finally, the persuasive speech. Sometimes students try to have all three speeches connect to one another. Sometimes all three speeches have nothing to do with one another. So you'll have a lot of latitude there. And we are going to be talking about writing outlines for speeches and some techniques that you could use for writing an outline. And outlines are going to be required for all of the three speeches that you will be delivering for a grade. Again, I'll talk about the guidelines in class, and I will ask you to send me a copy of your outline when the time comes and you're delivering your speech to my email again via PDF, ruiz@gcc.mass.edu, and I'll evaluate the outlines in a very informal manner, whether it be a checkmark system with a plus being excellent, or a check plus being good, or a check being satisfactory. There's even a lesson satisfactory and unsatisfactory, but most people earn a satisfactory and above. And the idea behind the outline is not necessarily that you're following the outline exactly, but that you've at least put it together, so that this means that you've done a good amount of preparation. And in the event, if your mind were to wander, that you have some sort of a guidepost, a map, if you will, on how to proceed. In the real world, your audience would never see your outline, but think of this class as a kind of workshop. So it's not exactly the real world in that I'm going to be asking to view your outline, and then I'll give you my suggestions about ways that you could improve your outline. You will also deliver, as I had indicated, informal, ungraded practice speeches, or at least have some communication with me about the speeches themselves. So the most important speech of the class is the speech you cannot view, the speech you yourself deliver. But luckily we have technology. So if you were willing to record your speech when you deliver it, and then more importantly, watch that recording and analyze your performance, I will be not only grateful, but will offer you a little bit of extra credit to try to entice you. Basically, you can earn 5 extra credit points on a quiz. Since we have quizzes that are 20 questions, obviously each question is 5 points, though you could earn some partial credit with a question. It isn't a lot of extra credit, and it's not supposed to be a lot of extra credit. The idea is that this is a learning exercise for you to be able to watch yourself. It's oftentimes done in mock interviews, where interviews are recorded so that you can watch your performance afterwards. So again, you've got the option of doing this for all 3 graded speeches. So if you were to do this for the autobiographical speech, the informative speech, and the persuasive speech, you could earn a total up to 15 extra credit quiz points. And that would be after I drop the lowest quiz grade. So this is supposed to benefit you mathematically. But again, the goal is not necessarily to earn extra credit, though I don't mind offering you a little bit. It's to be able to watch yourself and to be able to get a sense of how you appeared to your audience. So attendance, and again, we aren't meeting live, but attendance and discussion is still extremely important and can't be made up. So absences and tardiness will be negatively reflected in your participation grade, which again, I will be evaluating through our discussion form, where at the ending of each class, I will be posting a question for you to answer, and you have 24 hours in which to answer that question. Again, if you need additional time, ask me, and that will be your attendance, so to speak, for that particular class. And while you don't have to respond to your classmates' responses, I do want you to read all of your classmates' responses. And if it moves you at any point to respond to one of your classmates, please do so. Consultations, you can make an appointment with me, or you can also come to the optional chat or Zoom sessions. And then there's a section on conduct and demeanor. It's never been an issue in any of my classes, but I thought it was worth stating that each speech is the equivalent of an examination. So both the presenter and the audience should treat it with the appropriate respect. And inappropriate disruptions will be negatively reflected in your final grade. So I'm going to skip the section on plagiarism in our syllabus until next class and talk about the grading section, which is probably the section you were most interested in. And these are approximate percentages. Approximately 10% is what I'm calling participation, which means the discussion forum, questions, watching the videos, things of that nature. 10%, those outlines for the 3 speeches that I'm asking you to submit to me via email, and I'm evaluating informally on a checkmark system. Speech number 1, that 5-minute autobiographical speech, 20%. Speech number 2, the 10-minute informative speech, 20%. Speech number 3, the 15-minute persuasive speech, 20%. And then the quizzes, 20%, 4 quizzes after I drop the lowest grade and I've added any extra credit points that you might have accumulated. So slow and steady wins the race, so to speak, for this class. With an A, excellent, a B, good, a C, satisfactory. And I don't really like talking about the letters that follow C on the first day of class. So we'll just focus on excellent, good, and satisfactory. And then you can see that there's something called the course outline. And when you open that up, you will see the plan for the entire semester with, of course, the note that dates and assignments may be subject to change. And also that readings should be completed before the dates indicated. So this will give you an idea what it is we're going to be doing in class. And despite the disclaimer that dates and assignments might be subject to change, we will finish all of it by the ending of the semester. So week 1, as you can see today, the 3rd Monday is listed as introduction, which is what this is. And then next class, I'm planning on talking about the first 3 chapters in our textbook. Now, you can use an older edition of the text, by the way, if you are finding another edition of the text. Your page numbers will be different, but the chapters should be similar, which is why I've listed everything by chapter. So you can get the book through the GCC bookstore, but I know that there also are online venues that you can use, such as Amazon, to get text. So, but the expectation is that you do have a text and that you are reading. So, chapter 1 is speech in higher education. Chapter 2 is getting started, and chapter 3 is critical listening. So this is how I'm going to begin next class, is talking about why public speaking is important in higher education. How do we go about getting started with public speaking, and how do we engage in careful and active listening when we are listening to the speeches of others. Now, ideally, you'd have all 3 of those chapters read by next class. Don't panic if you can't. I am sort of anticipating that some of you are still acquiring textbooks and so forth, but certainly do the best you can. And on Wednesday, I'm going to continue with the next 3 chapters in the textbook. As I had indicated, the textbook is going to be pretty prevalent in the beginning of the semester to help prepare us for the actual speeches. So on Wednesday, I'll talk about Chapter 7, which is about organizing and outlining speeches. Chapter 8, beginning and ending speeches. And Chapter 9, wording the actual speech. And then on Thursday, believe it or not, that will get us through most of the textbook. Chapter 10, on Thursday, I'll talk about delivering speeches. And then I'll talk about Chapter 4, public speaking and cultural challenges. And then lastly, I'll talk about Chapter 5, understanding your audience. which leads us to Friday. And what that gives us is time to take our first quiz. Now, it won't necessarily be addressing everything we would have talked about up until this point. The focus of the quiz, as you can see when you're looking at the outline, will be in chapters 1 through 3 and chapters 7 through 8. And again, it'll be open book, open notes, so you can utilize the videos in your class notes and the textbook as well. And this is when I have practice speeches set up. So what I'll be doing is setting up times with you where we can connect, whether it be via Zoom or email or telephone, about how things are going for your first speech, which you will be delivering on Monday, the 10th. And that's your autobiographical speech. And again, you have the option of either uploading it to our Moodle site, or you have the option of delivering it live via Zoom. And by that point, I will have determined if any of you want to deliver it live, and we'll try to find a common time that will suit all of us for that. And then on Tuesday, I will start talking about your next speech. Chapter 6 is about using and finding supporting materials, because eventually you're going to have to do some outside research for finding information for your speech. But your first speech, autobiographical, is about you and your life. So you're not necessarily expected to do outside research. You should already have the information that you already need to deliver that speech. Chapter 11, using visual medium, because at this point, we'll talk about using audio and visual to help supplement your speech. It's something you could do with your first speech, but you won't be required to. You will be required to in your second or your informative speech. And then lastly, Chapter 12, speeches to inform, because that's what your second speech is going to be about, informative speeches. On the Wednesday, the 12th, we have our second quiz that'll be devoted to chapters 9 and 10 and chapters 4 to 5. Again, practice speeches, where I'll be setting aside time to connect with each of you individually about how things are going with your speech. And on the 13th, which is Thursday, is when you will be delivering speech 2, the informative speech, either via Zoom or uploading it onto our Moodle site, whichever you prefer. And then on Friday, we will talk about our very last speech. This is Friday, January 14th. We'll talk about chapter 13, which is about persuasive speeches. And we will also talk about chapter 14, which is about argumentation and critical thinking. And that gets us into week 3. That Monday, the 17th, is a holiday, Martin Luther King Day, so there are no classes. But on the 18th, which is Tuesday, is when you would have your third quiz with the focus on chapters 11 through 12 and chapter 6. And our last practice, where you would be contacting me and touching base about how things are going with your persuasive speech. The 19th of January, which is a Wednesday, is when you would be presenting your persuasive speech, whether you are presenting your speech live or you happen to be presenting your speech via Zoom. And then on the 20th, which is the Thursday, that would be quiz number 4, chapters 13 through 14. So that would be our semester. And again, if it turns out you do well on your first 3 quizzes, you can elect not to take the last quiz. So this gives you an idea of where we are in the semester. So you can see that I've also included there a speech rating template, which we will talk about a little bit more as the semester progresses, as to what an introduction and a body and a conclusion should have, and how speeches are evaluated based on content as well as delivery. So I can return to that, as well as plagiarism, over the next several classes. So what's left at this particular point is our attendance question. And I thought we could begin by your just introducing yourself and talking a little bit about who you are. So you can see that for a discussion form, I'm asking you to just introduce yourself to the class briefly. Feel free to upload pictures or video, but you're not required to. And that'll count as your attendance for this particular class. And again, what I will be doing is posting a video every day by 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm certainly going to try to do that beforehand, but certainly by 9 o'clock of that morning, you'll have a new video with the new material that we will be talking about. So I will continue on Tuesday where we start talking about the actual textbook and the delivery of speeches. So I hope you're doing well. I am doing well. And we will continue on next class. And please answer the discussion form, attendance questions, so we can get a sense as to who is in the class. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.